All right, here we are, day 11. Welcome, everybody. I'm here today, coming to you live from Lifeline Studios. And I'm bringing in my friend, Alan Snyder, keyboard extraordinaire, guitar player, singer. He does it all. How are you, my friend?
Good. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Hey, listen, this is great. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. And first of all, most important question, how's the baby? Who's not a baby
Elliott's
anymore?
fine. Elliott's fine. He's really not a baby. We hit the terrible twos early, I think, a little bit. So
yeah. And then you add
he's running all over the place, running the house already. So
he's in
I wouldn't have it any other way. I guess the only advice I get from a lot of other parents, because I am a new parent, is that you got to try to enjoy every stage, because every stage of parenting has good and bad and indifferent. Just enjoy it. So I'm good with that. Every day is good.
Breathe it all in. I mean,
right.
Absolutely. Right. So today, I'm looking forward to just a quick little conversation here. I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on day 11. The focus today is all about praising God. The story, the scripture, of Paul in prison and praying in prison and dealing with adverse times and thanking God in advance. And so what was, just jump in. What would you take away? What was kind of your thoughts on this?
Well, I think when I read I think with that particular passage, one of the things that I've always been fascinated with about God is he always works in ways that we can't really understand.
Yeah.
And he's beyond our belief and our understanding of things. And I've always found that fascinating in the sense that, like, for instance, with Paul in prison, just how he broke those barriers down for Paul. And despite the dire circumstances Paul was in, his mindset never wavered from God can do anything. Apart from our limited understanding, he's all powerful, all knowing, and all loving. And we can't even grasp that. I've always found that fascinating. And I think when we read this particular passage, there's nothing too big for God. There's nothing too bold for God. No matter where you are in your life with what you're going through, especially with this time we're all going through. Exactly. I think for me, that's really has sustained me and some of the people in my life that are going through some really difficult times. I always try to communicate to them that, as difficult as it is right now for you or whatever, there have been countless people, whether it's in the Bible or in the past, that have been through this and worse and have persevered because of their faith.
Yeah. You know what? That's interesting. You said, especially like in this, like you said, this time of COVID right now, and just all the crap going on in the world. It's like you kind of put yourself. What you said is that God sees things that we don't see. He sees beyond all this, so he already knows how it's going to turn out. It's just like Paul in prison, and he already knows what's going to happen. And I think that's a cool thing about God, right? Obviously, that's a comforting thing to know that he already knows. We've got all kinds of questions. He's already got the answers. So we can stew and try to worry about our prison that we're in. And yet he already knows. That's great. What do you think about, what does this say about us? What does this say about people? Like, what's the takeaway for us in this thing?
I mean, what do most people want? Most people want control. That's why it's so hard for most people to say, listen, I'm going to trust God when it doesn't feel rational to trust God. Wow. I don't know how this situation is going to end or how I'm going to get through this, but I do know one thing. God is in control. And I think we can all look back at our lives and go, whether you went through a tragedy, whether you went through adversity, whether you went through a depression, whether you went through a rejection, whether you went through a very painful time in your life, we've all experienced those things. But it's only a lot of times after we experience those things that have gone through that we can look back and go, God had my back. When I look at that, as painful as that was, I know for myself personally, the most painful things that I've been through, I look back at them in my life and I can say, man, there was a purpose for that. It wasn't just some it wasn't just some, random event that happened. God has a purpose for my life. And even though that purpose at times can be very painful, it's something that it makes us who we are almost. It shapes us. And I think as people, because we always want control, it's hard to give that up to God and say, trust God in spite of what you currently think is the right thing to do. Trust God.
Yeah, you just said that. It reminds me, it just makes me think, sometimes you kind of wish that you could have a time machine to either go back before a situation, like when you've come through something, and be like, I wish I would have demonstrated more faith early on. And because I know that God took me through this. And so now here we are. Now you wish you kind of had a time machine to go into the future and say, I know I wish I knew how it's going to turn out. I know he already knows. And so, because to me, I read this and I thought, this is the challenge for us, is that what real faith is praising God in advance. Thanksgiving is when you thank him for what he's already done. And that's great. I mean, have gratitude for what he's already done.
Right.
Faith is saying, God, I'm going to praise you now for this answer that I don't know what it is, but I know that you know. And I think that's a challenge for me. That's what I kind of took out of this. Like, for us, is to think of ourselves in that prison right now. And here's Paul, and he's worshiping, he's thanking God, he's praising him in advance. He didn't know how it was going to turn out, but he knew that God knew. Like you said,
well, what does God say about faith himself? It's being certain of what we hope for and sure of what we don't see, and that's what you're saying. You're saying, in spite of the fact that you might be going through a difficult time, there's a plan there. Yeah. And even though the plan might not seem rational, what do we do a lot of times as human beings? I got this. God, don't worry about it. I'll do this my way. I got this one. Don't worry about it. And what happens, right? And it's hard. It's very hard for us to get to that point,
Yeah.
In faith, where we say, despite of what I feel, despite of what seems rational to me, I'm going to trust God. And it's not always such a, polar opposite of each other, but a lot of times, faith is doing things that might not seem, rational to us. Right. And that's where people in my life that I look up to with regards to faith, they're always so secure with their faith. It's not that they don't have problems. It's not that they don't have concern. They have anxiety. They have fear, but their faith always comes into play with whatever circumstance they find themselves in. And that to me is what's inspiring to people that I know that are, living in faith.
That are living that out. So there's a challenge for us, everybody. Today, just kind of think about that idea about whatever circumstance you're in right now. Take the cue from Paul. He thanked God. He praised him in advance. Didn't wait for the circumstance to get all resolved. He said, God, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to give up, like Alan, like you said, I'm going to give up control, and I'm going to let you be in control. So, hey, that's awesome. I thank you. Thanks for just a few minutes sharing some of your heart and your thoughts. I love being on this spiritual journey with you. I can't wait until we can get the band back together and have everybody, the Lifeline band, back together, play again. So soon that'll come, but we're going to praise
you guys. Miss all you guys.
Yeah.
Miss everybody at Lifeline, man.
Awesome. Absolutely. All right, everybody. We'll have a great rest of the day, and we will see you tomorrow for day 12.